We present the State Institute of Urology, and we make an interview and to provide urological information to Russian urologists, because I think you very well know that not all of them know English and are able to participate in meetings.
He's going to translate. He's going to translate.
No.
You translate?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, and we provide information from different urological meetings to Russian urologists, and now we are making interview, and then we are going to translate it and present to Russian urologists. And now we'd like to ask you to introduce yourself, your work and your clinic, your first urological clinic, some words for Russian urologists.
Okay, you asked me to introduce myself. First of all, my name is Frans Debruyne. I'm a professor of urology, now emeritus professor, which means that I'm officially retired from my academic responsibilities. I'm no longer chief of the department, but I used to be the chief of the department of the University of Nijmegen in the Netherlands, which was a big department with a lot of subspecialties, a lot of urologists, a lot of residents, a lot of research. And I worked there for almost 36 years. Now I'm retired, but I'm not really not doing anything. I believe that andrological urology, which means men's health, is a new field of urology, and I'm devoting now my energy and my time in organizing andrological urological care for the aging males, so for men over the age of 50. And I have created a number of men's health centers in the Netherlands, of which I'm the medical director now. And I'm trying to provide men's health care, early diagnostic and preventive, for the aging male.
And in Russia you are very well known as a person who, I won't say established, but make EUA the way it is now.
The EU.
EU, oh sorry, EU, yeah, the way it is now. And become it so popular and so powerful. And it's really great work, and we are really interested in what was your main idea about creating and improving this society? Was it to improve scientific work? Was it to improve everyday practice things? What was the main idea when you was working for when you was start your working for EU?
Well, the EU, the European Association of Urology, is first of all a scientific organization. It is there to improve the scientific content and the standard of care for urological patients all over Europe. I didn't start the EU. The EU was started when I was a young resident in the early 70s. But I became, as a young professor, I became involved in the EAU in the sense that I was a member first of the scientific office in order to compose the programs of the congresses, and later on I was elected in the management committee, and as of 1992 I was elected Secretary General. In those days the EAU was still very, very small, but since in 1989, 1990 the Iron Curtain disappeared, so there were much more possibilities to contact Central and Eastern Europe. And at the same time, more or less at the same time I became Secretary General, I stimulated the board and stimulated the management committee of the EAU to open its doors for all European urologists, including the urologists in Central and Eastern Europe, in the former so-called communist countries. And I was quite successful in that, in the sense that we were first of all able to include the Polish, the Czech, the Hungarian, the Central European countries very rapidly. And now, almost 20 years later, the doors are open to also more Eastern countries like Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And it's quite successful in the sense that we have now they have not been able to realize a pan-European organization which urologists participate from Spain till Kazakhstan and from Finland till Sardinia, where every urologist feels at home. But the purpose of the European Association of Urology is a scientific purpose, no political role, but pure clinical science and improvement of the standard of care for the urological patients all over Europe. And there have been many programs over the year that were very instrumental to realize that goal. It's not there yet, but we are approaching very rapidly improvement of the quality of care, of urological care in Europe. And that's where I try to contribute to.
And how was it in Europe in the beginning? Is there a different society for andrology, of endourology? Now it's all united by EU. And for example, in Russia we have a lot of different societies to all subspecialties in urology. How it's possible to unite them to one society?
Well, urology is urology. And urology is an independent individual specialty. It's divided in several subspecialties, and the best way to guarantee the quality of care in all subspecialties or superspecialties of urology is to unite them in one organization, allowing them to develop their own program in consensus and in coherence with each other, not in debate or in discussing and even fighting each other. And that's also one of my main intentions. Indeed, urology is an individual specialty which comprises a large number of subspecialties, but every subspecialty is united under one umbrella, the umbrella of the European Association of Urology. And I know I don't know exactly what the situation in Russia is, but if Russian urology is divided between regions or divided between subspecialties or divided between sections, and they don't collaborate, it's not a good situation. Because by definition, urologists are very tolerant people. They are very great, all of them, great individuals who can understand the needs and the aspiration of somebody else. And if you don't unite together, you will never have a strong society. And if I know that the situation in Russia is not so far advanced as in some other countries, but I would urge you and advise you to do that very rapidly. There is no difference between the urology from Ekaterinburg or Rostov-on-Don or Moscow or St. Petersburg. They're all urologists. They are the same. They have the same ideals. They have the same goals. They have the same responsibility. They have the same profession. And they should work in the same direction altogether. Of course, every man and every woman has his individual personality. But being together in a greater organization will just give opportunities to strengthen your personality and not to weaken it. So you see examples like in the other big countries. You see the BOS, the British Association of Urologists, you see the French Association, they're all the same. They have a strong national organization uniting all different departments, all urologists, and governing the subspecialties within the umbrella of the mother specialty. That's my advice for Russia as well.
And in Europe, there were different countries, different languages, and when does English become the official language of EU?
There is official language. I mean, there is it's the scientific language. If you like it or not, some people don't like it. But no, everybody has to accept that English is the scientific language. Not only in urology, but also in other specialties, in other sciences, in politics, in business. Why is it English? Why is it not French? Why is it not Russian? Why is it not my language? Because in 500 years ago, in medieval times, the scientific language was Latin. And maybe 500 years from now, I doubt, but it could be that the scientific language will be Russian. Of Uzbekistani, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, but today, English is not the official language of the EAU, but English is the international scientific language. And you have to accept it if you like it or not. But there is no discussion about that. And if some Russian urologists say, I don't learn English because I think Russian is more important, fine, but he's stupid. You should speak English. You speak English. Why don't you speak Russian with me? Because English is the scientific communication language today for everybody. When you go to Asia, when you go to the United States, when you go to Japan, when you go to Russia, and you want to communicate with each other, I don't speak Russian, you don't speak Dutch, so we communicate in English. And I see a big improvement in younger Russians speaking good English. I just come from a meeting with a lot of Eastern European urologists, and they all spoke English. With mistakes. It doesn't care, I make mistakes. My English is not perfect, but you understand me. And I understand you. Your English is not perfect, but I can understand you and we can communicate. And I see that you understand me. And that's very, very important. And I see more and more very positive evolution in Russia as well, where people speak English. In your department, many people speak English. Apolikin speaks English very, very well. And I know many other urologists from Russia that speak English. And my generation, the older generation doesn't, but that's over. It's now the young generation, those who are 30, 45, 50 years old, and they all speak English. Or they all should speak English.
They should learn English.
And they should learn English, of course, but they learn English. They are obliged.
But in Europe, anyway, EU exists, but national society are really strong in Germany, in France, and almost in all European countries. They are quite strong. How does EU communicate with national societies?
Very easily. Very easily. National societies are there for national interests. The Russian society is there for Russian interests in Russia. We are not going, the EAU is not going to interfere in Russian affairs. We are not going to interfere in specific French urological affairs or Dutch specific urological affairs. We have our own, the national societies have their own national urological responsibility, which is different from country to country. There are also political and healthcare issues involved there, which are specific for a country. But since the EAU is not involved in any politics, not involved in any healthcare issues, but the EAU is there only to protect, stimulate, expand the quality, all over quality of urological care in Europe. We unite all those individual national organizations. They have the special interest, but they have a pan-European interest and responsibility by joining the European Association of Urology. And we have no problems with any of the national societies wherever they exist. And fortunately, most countries, not to say almost all countries in Europe, have a strong, well-organized national society. And believe that Russia is one of the very few countries where this has not yet fully happened. It's difficult, it's a big country, it's many regions, many different big cities. You know, it's much easier to do that in France or in the Netherlands or in Hungary, because it's much smaller countries. But a big country is not a contradiction for a good national society. Look at the United States, they have a good national society. Look at Brazil, big country. Look at China, even more difficult than Russia, but they have a good national society, and because they have a willingness to collaborate together, and they have a willingness to take the same responsibility in a global scale in China for global urology, like France, or Italy, or Spain, or Hungary, or whatever, have as national society an interest in in taking responsibility for the global or pan-European urological care and urological responsibility. So there is no conflict with national societies. But every country should have a well-organized, united, which means working together, national society. And I think in Russia that's going to happen as well. I know that there was a difference between St. Petersburg and Moscow, and maybe between Ekaterinburg or Vladivostok and Donetsk. But Donetsk is not in Russia.
Yes, it's Ukraine.
Ukraine. Or Rostov-on-Don. I know that there are differences, but there are differences between Amsterdam and Maastricht. They speak a different language. But they are united in a national society and they sit together. And an advantage of a national society is that you can discuss in your own language.
Native language.
Because there is no obligation to speak English. But when you become international, English is language.
So just EU gives its members what they want, and so the number of members increasing, right?
Well, a large membership is not a goal on itself. Mm-hmm. Large numbers of members of the EU is a consequence of the pan-European responsibility of the European Association of Urology. When you have a mission to improve quality of care of urology in Europe, national societies and national urologists automatically join. And indeed, some national societies have taken over the scientific quality of care of the EU, for example, in the guidelines, because the guidelines are so good.
Yes. Really.
And a sick patient in Budapest is the same as a stone in Budapest is the same as a kidney stone in Madrid. So the guidelines, the approach, the urological care is in principle the same.
So the goal is to give the same urological care to all patients.
That is the ultimate goal. Of course, this is not possible because the country is different.
Try to reach this goal.
But we set the guidelines, we set the quality standards. Mm-hmm. And every individual urology has his own responsibility to work according to those standards within his own clinical possibilities, which are different in my country than in your country, and different in Spain as in, for example, the Ukraine. I know that. And it's different in Madrid as compared to a small village in the south of Spain. But the urologist there has to know and be informed and hence try to apply the same standard of care. And that's the goal of the EU.
Does EU change according to the needs of urologists, of ordinary members? Does it look for its everyday needs or whatever? Does ordinary member can, for example, ask for some new things in EU, or just it's on the other side? EU provide the basic rules, the standards of urological care, so that ordinary members should reach these standards.
Of course, the EU sets the standards. And of course, the individual urologist has, first of all, be aware of the standards. That's the reason he has to be here and has to sit in the sessions and listen to the presentations, to the evolutions. Of course, the standard of care evolves. Today, urology is different from urology two years ago. 2 years ago, urology was different from urology 20 years ago, of course. But standard of care evolves with technical evolution, scientific evolution, molecular biological evolution, science and scientific discoveries which are applicable in daily urological practice. The EU set the standards. Today, we have, for example, minimal invasive surgery. Well, If minimal invasive surgery for whatever urological disease is better than open surgery, the standard of care is minimal invasive surgery. So every urologist has to try to adapt his care according to these standards. Of course, not everybody, for example, has a robot. That's understandable. But every country will have robots. In every big city there will be robots, and the urologist has to discuss for himself if he will provide his patient, even when he doesn't have the techniques available himself, that he will provide his patients with the latest available or the best available or the standard available care for the disease that he has. And therefore, the urologist, and they do understand that more and more, has to understand that he cannot do everything himself. So there has to be collaboration with other centers, with centers of expertise for subspecialty. Oncology is an example, or endourology, or pediatric urology, or female urology. And that's important. You have to collaborate together that a patient, in principle, should get the best available care in his own country. And there are differences, and there will remain differences, of course. But the differences should at least be minimized, and if possible, the optimal care should be provided to the patient. And the individual ordinary, you say it ordinary, the common urologist should be aware of the developments. If he doesn't go to a meeting and never goes to, and never read a publication, and never read a urological book, and never goes to a meeting, he will not be aware of the latest evolution of the standard of care. If I don't read the guidelines and I don't study the guidelines, I will never be aware what is the standard of care now. So I have an obligation, I have a responsibility to keep updated with the standard of care, whether I live in Moscow, or I live in Amsterdam, or I live in Stockholm. It doesn't make any difference. The responsibility for the common urologist is the same, and the EAU is a platform, a forum, where this knowledge is provided, not only the EAU, but all European and extra-European scientific meetings. And likewise, in the national societies, based on the knowledge of the common standard, this information should be provided as well, as many times as possible.
And that's why European School of Urology was created to provide information and knowledge.
Yeah, that's European School of Urology is a postgraduate education program, which is a program that allows the urologists to get in a registered official way enough points, enough certifying points for recertification. When I become a urologist today, and I never go to a meeting, I never go to a presentation, I never read a book, I never read a publication, I will not be a good urologist 10 years later. And this process has to be provided, and the European School of Urology does that, but also national societies do that. But the European School of Urology does that on a standardized, justifiable, scientifically and clinically justifiable way. And if you participate in the activities, you get your qualification, requalification points that indicates that you are an updated urologist. This is all new. It doesn't exist in your country, I guess, but in my country, I have to be re-registered as a urologist every 5 years.
We also do to be re-registered, but it's not, we don't need to get any points, we just go like an exam every 5 years, but it's more official than practical.
You need to, when you want to have an official recertification, you need an official program and you need rules. And the rules are points. And of course, when I was a young resident, it didn't exist in my country either. Nobody controlled if I went to a meeting, but now I have to. And if I don't recertify, I'm not allowed to practice by the government. It's a governmental requirement as well. And that will come in Russia as well. It's not there. It's not there in Asian countries. It's not there in African countries. It's not there in South American countries. But it started 10 years ago in Western Europe. And 10 years from now it will be everywhere. It's in the United States, it's in the Western world, it's in Japan. It starts now in India, which is also a big, huge country, bigger than than Russia. It starts there. It's going to be allowed.
Yeah, we understand that it's really important and we really need it. But the thing is, for example, conference in Russia, they almost are provided by and sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. So the content of the conference is not really present the recent achievements in urology.
You have to collaborate with the pharmaceutical industry because the pharmaceutical industry or the technical industry do a lot of progress in research and clinical development. You have to collaborate with them, but they cannot dominate the scientific program. They cannot. They try sometimes, but this is over. This is forbidden now in Western Europe. They're here, but they don't influence the program. Of course they can give information, but information which is evidence-based. And they will do that in Russia as well. And there is no conflict when you collaborate with the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry, again, does a lot of developments. But the pharmaceutical industry should not dominate the scientific and clinical content of conferences. They can be present, they can market their products, but then they cannot influence the urologist with not evidence-based information. And they don't do. There is no pharmaceutical industry here which dominates the program. They can be present, but they have no influence whatsoever in the program. And that will come in Russia as well. And that is the responsibility of the National Russian Society. That is the responsibility of your urological leaders. Because in every society you have leaders. And when you have a leader, he has a responsibility. In your country, the chief of state is Mr. Putin. He has a huge responsibility.
Of the whole country.
Yeah, and it's up to the people to judge if he fulfills his responsibility. Or your leaders in urology or in cardiology or in whatever, in business. If your leaders in business work according to evidence-based, in medicine, evidence-based standards. And pharmaceutical companies do more and more apply and comply with those standards, because otherwise urologists will no longer believe them.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that, but it's the responsibility of your leaders to maintain the optimal standards of information and distribution of scientific information in your congresses, not the pharmaceutical industry, not the technical industry, not the politics, the urologists.
That's why your Congress is so popular, because of its scientific and real evidence-based content. But our conference, they are not this way. They're a lot of dependent on companies.
I have been in Russia many times. When I come to Russia, I only present evidence-based, and people listen. When your leaders present evidence-based information that they derive from their own studies or from studies from abroad, people will listen. A urologist, wherever he lives in the world, has such type of education that he will listen more carefully to evidence-based information than to propaganda.
Of course.
So it has a local or a national flavor, the way it's done. Your meeting is different from the Chinese meeting, and the Chinese meeting is different from the American meeting. And the American meeting is different from the Brazilian meeting. They all have local flavors. But what is in the scientific room, and it is in scientific discussion, is always originating from the same sources, which is evidence-based.
And EU is now a really powerful organization. And how do you see the future of EU? What is the main trends for development in the future? Is it going to be anything new, or is it going to stay stable, like, for example? Like
no, we are here on a Congress which is quite big. I'm not sure that the Congress will stay like that. The first 10 years it will be the same, but in 15 years probably we will all have at home, and we will sit at home and have internet and have you speaking on your television, and you will be obliged to all the urologists. I don't know, but it will be e-health, it will be e-communication, it will be modern communication. Of course, why should you travel from Moscow to Milan when you can hear and discuss and interact on the same way in front of your television in Moscow? It's, by the way, it's also more becoming too expensive for everybody. So that will change, but the EAU will change, of course. It will, in my view, the next 10 years, 15 years, will stay the leading organization, and it will have all this membership, but it will maintain his clinical and scientific responsibility. That will not change. The methods by which they distribute this information will change, but the mission, the goal, the objective will not change. And interaction will be much more easier. You will interview me from Moscow, not lively here. I don't know how rapid those things will go, but there will be a significant change. And will urology change? Of course urology will change. Technically, surgery will disappear. Open surgery will, in my view, become less and less frequent and centralized in just a couple of centers. It depends also on the evolution of costs. But this is politics. This is different from country to country, and the EU does not interfere with that. We don't say this is a standard of care because something is cheap or something is expensive. We say this is a standard of care because it is the best for the patient. But the future for urology in the first 25 years is good, because there will be more and more and more patients, because patients get older and older, and urology is I'm not saying it's a geriatric specialty, but it's a specialty for the aging man and woman. So there will be a lot of patients for urology in the 10, 15, 20 years to come.
And regarding the future of the whole urology, what do you think of the future? Do you see the role of prophylaxis in the future of urology? Is it going to take a larger part, or is to be more important or not?
Prevention will be extremely important, because prevention is like a car. If you wait till your car is broke and never take care of your car, and your car is broke, it's much more expensive than regularly take care of your car and prevent that it breaks down. Prevention is going to be extremely important. For example, smoking. For your country, smoking, drinking. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yes,
in my country, it's still a big problem, smoking. Well, I predict that it will become a time that they say, if you smoke, you don't get lung surgery. If you drink, you don't get liver disease surgery, because you have to take care of your health. Of course, societies will never be able to regulate everything, because humans are humans and have their own will and their own drive and their own intention, and that will not change. But prevention will be more and more accepted by societies. You don't see anybody smoking here.
No.
They go outside.
Outside, yeah.
30 years ago, you were sitting here and you were smoking. Here. I remember that I did outpatient clinic. I didn't smoke, but some of the residents were smoking. This is impossible now. The same will happen with alcohol, the same will happen with overweight. You are not overweight, you are slim, very good, but there are many people that are overweight. Well, all those things will come more and more accepted by society, and prevention in urology is going to be extremely important, because if you don't prevent in a right way, if you don't promote a healthy lifestyle, people will get older and will be handicapped or sick, and this is not in line with your quality of life. So prevention will take time. But I predict that also in your country and here it's going to be forbidden to smoke. 10 years, 15 years, forbidden. Yeah, at least publicly. You will be able to smoke at home, like you will be able to drink at home, but they will not allow you to drink in public places. But I don't know. But all those kinds, they will say when you have overweight, listen, that is not a good lifestyle. And you will for yourself say, okay, I have to take care of my weight, I have to take care of my vessels, because it's quality of life. So prevention is extremely important. And prevention is important because if you continue to provide only reparative care, it's not, no society will be able to pay.
Yes, too expensive. And could you give us some advices to Russian urologists to improve our urological care?
Come to the EU.
What can we do at home? We are here already for EU.
Collaborate with the EU. The EU, the Russian, I'm no longer involved in the direct organization of the EU, but the EU has always had close contact with the Russian leadership. We knew that the Russian leadership was a little bit divided sometimes, but I see that also Russian leaderships and Russian urologists become more and more inclined towards collaboration. So I advise the Russian Association of Urology, if I may give an advice, I don't know what you're going to do with this video, but unite, work together, set up programs together with the EU, because they have already proven the validity of the programs, teaching programs, education programs, postgraduate programs, set them up for Russian urology, organize within the Russian Society of Urology a more or less obligatory postgraduate education, go around with your Russian leaders and eventually with the support of the EU, go around to your regions, instruct, educate, give lectures, give programs, schools for residents, qualify, regulate your qualifications, regulate, stratify and identify and unify your urological education, your training programs. There's a lot of work to do, and that I advise. And it's not so difficult, because if the will is there to do amongst the leadership, if the will is there, it's not so difficult. Of course, it takes some energy, but the Russians are as good as we are. They are not yet so well organized, but 20 years ago we were not, or 30 years ago we were not well organized either. And since you are a big country, I believe in a strong postgraduate, a strong training program all over the country the same, which is a responsibility, in my view, of the Russian Society of Urology, of the Russian Urological Association, whatever you call it, and disperse your programs over the regions. Don't ask all the urologists from Vladivostok to come to Moscow. No, send 3 urologists to Vladivostok, where there are 300 urologists, or to Irkutsk, is a place in Siberia, or Ekaterinburg, where there are 300 urologists, or to St. Petersburg, or to whatever, to Murmansk. I don't know if there are urologists there.
There are, of course, there are.
Yeah, go there. Go make programs and make leadership responsible to distribute the programs.
Thank you. It's a really good advice for us.
I don't know.
But it's really difficult to make it united all over the country.
If you want to do it, you will be able to do it.
Okay.
Forget about your direct personal advantages, not your personal interests. You are as a leader, you are a strong individual. You want to be a strong individual. But there's a difference between personal advantage and personal interest. When you are a real leader, you look for personal interest, not personal advantage.
Great.
That are the real leaders. And there are many Russian urologists with these capacities.